I've had my pet bluegill for about 10 months now, and up until this point, I've been feeding them a diet that consists mostly of fish pellets and very little else. But now, my bluegill have grown large enough to eat small earthworms. However, I really doubt that these wild-caught native fish have ever seen an earthworm before, so it'll be interesting to film my pet bluegill encountering this live food for the very first time. The bluegill were expecting fish pellets, so they're not sure what to make of this worm. The largest bluegill gets right in there to have a closer look, but the worm is tangled up in the plants, making it difficult for him to see the prey clearly and remove it from the floating vegetation without getting a mouthful of plants, as well as whatever else might be hidden in there. So he's very cautious in his approach until he knows for certain that it's safe to eat. And now he seems torn between keeping an eye on me and getting a better look at the worm. And he's right to be cautious because it's a dangerous world out there, and it's always better to go hungry than to risk a serious injury by being too eager. So he takes his time deciding if the worm is safe to eat while still looking out for any potential threats, which in this case means that he also has to keep an eye on me. Nonetheless, the bluegill's reluctance to go after these worms will eventually disappear as he learns that both the Dave and the worms mean him no harm. As for the mindset of the earthworm, it's just trying to get itself out of the water and back onto the land by holding on to the plants and climbing upwards. And it's pretty obvious that my pet bluegill still doesn't trust me, which kind of hurts my feelings. And now it seems as if he's decided that it's too dangerous to risk trying out this new food, so he swims away, and that's when the smaller bluegill decide that it's their turn to give this worm a closer look, which causes the larger bluegill to rush right back before the little ones can steal what he thinks is his. And it doesn't take these fish very long before they figure out that the worms are not a threat, but they're actually a delicious treat. And as usual, it's the smaller bluegill that are the boldest as they throw caution to the current and take their chances with this unfamiliar food. The largest bluegill has no trouble eating these worms, but for some of the smaller fish it can be a real struggle because the worms are almost as long as they are. Which means that the smaller bluegill can't swallow the worm right away, and it ends up swimming around with a large part of the worm sticking out of its mouth. And the other bluegill see this and will try to steal the worm if they can, so the bluegill with the worm has to keep moving or it will lose the worm to another hungry fish. Day after day, I feed my pet bluegill with a combination of fish pellets and live earthworms, and as time goes on, the bluegill become more and more accustomed to feeding on these live worms, which are now eaten with very little hesitation. I think they enjoy the thrill of the hunt because they're starting to get very excited every time they realize that I'm about to give them worms. And now I'm starting to think about what other live foods I could feed to my pet bluegill. And one of the first creatures that comes to mind is a cricket, because live crickets are readily available and they're inexpensive. So they'll probably be the next live food that I give to these bluegill. I'm also considering trying to feed them crayfish that I can catch in large numbers from a local stream. So small crayfish will probably be on the menu at some point in the near future. And there are always lots of guppies and swordtails in the fish room as well, and feeding my pet bluegill with live fish would make for a very interesting video. But I realize that many of my viewers would think that it's cruel to feed my bluegill live guppies. However, very few people will have an issue with me feeding them worms. And it has occurred to me that most people are fine using live foods to feed their fish, as long as the food does not have a spine. Because for some reason, once a creature has evolved far enough to develop a backbone, we suddenly seem to have a lot more empathy and consideration for their suffering. But the humble earthworm has no spine, and so we turn a blind eye to its pain as we impale them on razor-sharp hooks or drop them into a fish tank to satisfy the appetite of our hungry bluegill. So now I think it's only fair that I take the time to thank these earthworms for their reluctant contributions to this video and for the valuable role that they play in keeping our terrestrial ecosystems healthy and functioning. And while they may not have a spine or two eyes with which to see the world, worms are living proof that even the simplest of creatures can play a vital role in the health of our planet. Because without the worms, the soil beneath our feet would lose its vitality, and the ecosystems that we depend on for our survival would suffer as a result, reminding us that the true impact of an organism is not measured by its complexity, but by its purpose. Thanks for watching, and I really hope that you have a beautiful day.